All right, welcome back, guys. So we made some pretty nice progress on our navbar here, although we still need to add some responsiveness, so that's what we're going to do in this video. Also, don't forget to subscribe because I release videos like this each and every week, so if you don't want to miss out, then do make sure to smash the heck out of that subscribe button for me. Anyway, let's go ahead and now continue on where we left off. So I have my text editor open, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new file inside of this abstracts, which I'm going to call _mixins.scss. So this is where we're going to see how to create these mixins so that we can conveniently have responsiveness in our application. So the way that you create a mixin is you do @mixin, and then the name of the mixin, which I'm going to call respond. And then you can also pass a parameter to this. So I'm going to do $breakpoint, and then that's going to be the parameter. I'm going to have my curly braces. And then you can have a series of if checks, which is really nice. So I can do @if, that's how I define one of these if checks. And then I can have a condition. So I can check if breakpoint is equal to phone. Then I'm going to apply this styling. So the way you'd use this somewhere is you'd have something like respond phone. And then when you use this, it's going to use this phone as the breakpoint. It's going to hit this check where phone's equal to phone. So we're going to go ahead and apply this. So between here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a media query because that's how we do responsiveness. So I'm going to do @media, only screen and max width, which is going to be 37.5 EM. All right, so why 37.5 EM? So 37.5 is going to be the sizing of the parent element, which is going to be 16 pixels because we're not using rem, we're using the EM. So let me grab my calculator. So this is how that works. So I have 16. I multiply that by 37.5. That's going to give me 600. So this right here means max width of 600 pixels. So what I'm going to do is for the phone, I'm going to have the width be 600 pixels or less. That's going to apply this. I'm also going to have 900 or less. So 900 is going to be for a tablet in portrait mode. So the math going backwards, I would just divide this by 16. And then I would get the EM unit. So in the case of a tablet in portrait mode, which is going to be 900 pixels, I'm going to have 56.25 EM. So that's going to be this next one. Just to show this quickly, and then that was 56.25. So I could have 56.25 EM, and then I can set this to something like tab port. So this is the way that you can set these things up. Now another thing I need to do between here is have @content, and then a colon. This way I can have the content that's going to go inside of here. So the way that's going to work is, let's say if I'm inside of here, I want to style this logo, I can do @include respond, say phone if I want to have styling for a phone. Then between here, I can have my styling for a phone. So I can do something like font size, let's say 1.6 rem. And then on the phone screen, it would apply this over this. So that's the way it works. I'm going to remove this. I just wanted to show an example of how these mixins work. So let's go back and now implement the rest of these. So I'm going to have @content for this one as well, because this @content is whatever's put between there, like where I did that font size styling in that example. And then I'm also going to have another breakpoint, which is going to be for tab land. So this is going to be a tablet in landscape mode. And then for this one, I'm going to have 1200 pixels or less be the max width. So for 1200 pixels, I'm going to divide that by 16. That's going to give me 75. So here I'm going to put 75. Then I'm going to have one final breakpoint, which I can just paste this, and this is going to be for a big desktop. So if anyone's using a larger screen, I can use this instead. And then instead of a max width, I'm going to have a min width check. And then this is going to check for 112.5. And then that's equivalent to 1800 pixels. So you can also confirm that with 1800 divided by 16, and you get 112.5. So that's just to show you the math behind these numbers so that they're not a mystery. And there we go. Now we have our mixin in place. So now what we have to make sure we do is that we open up this main so that we can actually bring in this partial file inside of here. I'm going to bring it at the top. So I'm going to do @import and then abstract/mixins. And there we go. So now we can include this styling as well. All right, so now this is going to make it nice and convenient for us to do some responsiveness inside of our application. So one thing I think that could be pretty nice is with this stuff right here, is if I have some sort of container styling wrapping all of my different pages. That way this isn't hugging the very left of the screen. So that's the next thing I'm going to tackle. So I'm going to open up this base.scss, and then below my body, I'm going to make a class of container. And then this, I'm going to set a max width, which is going to be 114 rem, or 1140 pixels. That's going to be the max width. And I'm going to apply some padding, which is going to be 0 padding on the top and bottom, and then 80 pixels on the left and right, which I do with 8 rem. And then this is where I'm going to also show an example of using the mixin. Because if I'm on, say, a phone, I don't want to have 80 pixels of padding on the left and right. That's really going to squish things together. So I can do @include respond, which is my mixin, passing the breakpoint of phone. And then as for the content, I can set the padding to be 0 on the top and bottom, and then say something like 20 pixels on the left and right. That way it looks a little bit better. So this way it's not going to be hugging the left and right of the screen, it's not going to be sandwiched in the middle, and it's going to look just right. And then another thing I want to do is, remember previously I was talking about the nav links where they have a active class that gets applied. So right now I also want to have that styling for that active class. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have the color be 777. And then another thing I'm going to do, just to ensure that this gets applied, is I'm going to do this exclamation mark important. This way, this will ensure that this active class styling gets applied to my nav links and overwrites anything else that's over there. So now, if let's say I go to the about, I have this now in that styling. I have this in that styling, but something you're going to notice is that our home is also in that styling. So this is something similar to what was happening in our routing for the about page, where we saw that the home component and the, let's say, the about component were displayed when you're on the about page, and we have to pass this exact property. We have to do the exact same thing with the nav links as well. So in my navbar.js, right here with this nav link, I'm going to pass the exact property to this and save that, and that way this has to match exactly in order for that active class to get applied here. So now when I'm on the services page, I don't see that home page with the active class styling anymore. And now it works appropriately. All right, so it looks good. And then the next thing I want to work on is that hamburger button. So for that hamburger button, the place I'm going to put it is right over here. So right after my contact, it's going to be a div with the class name of navbar __ button. And then I'm going to have a div with the class name of navbar __ button __ component. And I'm going to copy this down 2 times. So these things right here, they're going to be the lines of that hamburger button. We're going to have 3 lines. Each of these is going to be one of those lines. And this right here is going to be that wrapper, which is the overall button. And then we're going to be using this in order to position these things here. All right, so now let's go ahead and save that, open up our navbar.scss and style this. So I'm going to go right to the bottom. So right below my logo, I'm going to do an and button. I'm going to set the display to be none. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to include my respond, and I'm going to do tab port. And then whenever we have a tablet that's in portrait mode or smaller, we're going to show this button. Otherwise, we're not going to display it. So this is a nice way that we can do that. And then I'm going to have display be set to flex when it is present. So that way, instead of none, it's flex. And then this, remember, is what's going to position those different lines that make up our hamburger button. So I'm going to have flex direction, which is going to be column. I'm going to have justify content, which is going to be space between. I'm going to have align items, which is going to be center. So right now, instead of having things directed on a row like we saw with our navbar, instead they're going to be in the column. And then the justify content is going to be from the top to bottom. The align items is going to be from the left and right. So those different lines that make up our hamburger button are going to be centered, going from left to right, and they're going to be spaced apart with the space between. And then the next thing I want to do is set a height to this. So I'm going to do height of 65%. I'm going to set some margin. which I'm going to set to 17.5% on the top and bottom, and then 0 on the left and the right. And then why 17.5? Because 17.5 times 2 is going to be 35, and then 35 plus 65 is going to be 100. And then below this, I'm going to have a width, and then it's going to be the width of the button, which I'm going to set to 50 pixels, which I can do with 5 rem. And then I'm going to have a cursor of pointer just to make it clear that you can click on this, although you probably won't actually see this sort of thing because when you're on a phone, you're going to have a touch screen typically, so you're just going to be clicking on it. But either way, I just want to make sure that this is present just in case. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a hover. So I'm going to do &:hover, and then I'm going to set the height to 70% if we hover, and margin of 15% on the top and bottom, and 0 on the left and the right. So this way, when we hover over it, the hamburger gets spaced out a little bit. So that way it looks like you can click on it. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to style the different components. So those lines that make up the hamburger button. So I'm going to do &_component to style those. And then I'm going to do display none. So that way we don't display them by default. And then I'm going to use my mixin of respond tab port. And then when this is the case, I'm going to have display block. So it's going to be block instead of display none. So that way we can see it. It's going to have a height. So they're going to be very thin. So I'm going to do 0.3 rem, which is 3 pixels. I'm going to have a width of 100% to make up the total width of the parent component, which is our button. And then what I'm going to do is set a background color, because we can't do color because these are divs. So they're going to have a background color instead, which is going to be a gray color. It's going to be this dark gray color, which is the same color as our links. So if we take a look at this now, we have display none. Now, if I open up the Chrome Developer Tools, then what I can do is I can click on this, and now I see this hamburger button. Now, when I have it set to something like a device, like the iPad, we see that that hover property doesn't do anything. So what I can do instead is I can have this responsive property just so we can see that behavior. So once the screen is small enough, we have this present. Now, of course, we still have these links present, which is another thing that we don't really want. I want when the screen is tablet in the portrait mode, I only have this in the hamburger button and on the phone as well. So that way these things don't get all squished together as you get smaller. And now, or I guess in the responsive, it doesn't quite work. So let me go ahead, click this button again and actually shrink this thing. Then we're going to see that highlight thing happen. So when I go over this, now they get spaced out. So that looks very nice. So now let me go ahead and close up those Chrome Developer Tools, and let's deal with now hiding these buttons when our screen is smaller. So this is relatively simple to accomplish. So what we want to do is find our list item, which is right here. And I just want to have a display of none on our list item when we have a tablet in portrait mode or smaller. So right below here, I can do @include respond tab -port, which is our breakpoint. And then I can do display of none. Then I save that. And now in this case, when I have my Chrome Developer Tools open, I can shrink and increase. Now I can see all these links are present. As soon as I go smaller, they go away. So that's quite nice. And now when I click this, nothing happens yet because we still have to have the logic for our sidebar. So I'm going to close up those Chrome Developer Tools, go back to our code. And now let's start to tackle that sidebar component. So I'm going to close up some of these files that we don't need right now. All right, so now in my sidebar, I'm accepting the isOpen and the close sidebar props. So I'm just going to copy these and then destructure them in here. So the isOpen, so I'm destructuring the props. That way I can call these things directly inside of here. And then I also have the close sidebar, which is going to be the logic for closing my sidebar. So now with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my fragment, since this is something I'm going to need. And then here, I'm going to, instead of a div, have my fragment. And then the reason for the fragment is so that I can have my nav element. But then above here, I also want to have some logic, whether I display a backdrop or not. So that backdrop is that grayed out section behind my sidebar that when I click it, it closes this sidebar. And then I'm also going to have some logic in this component. So instead of having the arrow function and then these round parentheses, I'm going to do a return and wrap all of this in curly braces. And then I'm going to fix up this indenting. And then I'm going to do const styles. which is going to check if isOpen is true. If that's the case, we're going to apply a certain styling. Otherwise, we're going to apply something else. So this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to have sidebar, and then sidebar _open. So this right here is an example of a modifier. So I'm going to have the open modifier applied. Oops, this should be sidebar to the sidebar. And then here I'm going to have the sidebar and sidebar -- closed. So I'm going to modify this to be closed or open. And then with this navbar here, I can do class name, which is going to be equal to a set of curly braces, backticks, $, curly braces. So then I can bring in this styles. And then the styles is either going to be this if it's open, or it's going to be this if it's closed. So the behavior is, if it's open, it's present on the screen, taking up about 70%, let's say, of the screen. And then if it's closed, it moves off the screen. And then here we're going to have logic for our backdrop. So I'm going to check is open if this is true. If that's the case, I'm going to have a div with a class name of sidebar backdrop. And then this is also going to have an onClick property, which is going to be this close sidebar. That way, when we click on the backdrop, we hit this close sidebar, and then this close sidebar, what it's going to do is just set show sidebar to be false. That way we don't show the sidebar. And then I just have to close this element. And then if isOpen isn't true, all I'm going to do is just return a fragment. That way nothing's displayed. All right, so with that, now let's go ahead and start putting together this sidebar. So inside of here, I'm going to have a div with the class name of sidebar _logo. Because again, I'm going to have some kind of logo, except with this one, when I click it, I don't want it to navigate anywhere. And also the sizing and styling is going to be a little bit different than the one on our navbar. And then inside of here, I'm just going to have the text navbar app. And then below here, I'm going to have, actually what I want to do is wrap everything inside of an unordered list like I did with the navbar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an unordered list. I'm going to place this to be inside of here. And then I'm going to have some list items. So this unordered list, I'm going to pass a class name of sidebar _list. I'm going to have this inside of it. Then I'm going to have my list items. So I'm going to have a list item, the class name of sidebar list item. And then it's going to have an onClick property, which is going to be that close sidebar. That way, when we click on one of these links, we also close that sidebar on top of navigating to the appropriate page. And then I'm going to have my nav link, which I have to make sure that I import. So I'm going to do that right at the top here, import nav link. And this is coming from React router DOM. And then this nav link. Also, I'm going to close up this terminal so it's out of our way. And then this nav link is going to have some styling. So I'm going to do class name of sidebar _link. And then I'm going to have a 2. And then this 2 is going to be /. And then remember, we have to also pass that exact. So that way, if it matches exactly, then we're going to do the styling. That way, when we're on something like /about, we don't style this as well. And then between here, I'm just going to have the text home. And then we're going to have this a couple more times. We're going to have it for the about page. So I'm going to do about. And then I'm going to have /about. And then I don't have to pass this exact here. I'm going to copy this again. I'm going to have the services. This is going to be /services. And then below that, I'm going to have the gallery, which is going to be /gallery. And then below that, I'm going to have the contact. And that's going to be /contact. So there we are. This is the complete implementation for this sidebar. Now we just have to make sure that we style it. So currently, this is our sidebar. It's present on the screen by default. We have all these different items here. And when I click them, the navigation will still work, except I want this thing to have its own separate styling from the navbar itself, because it's its own separate component. So let's go ahead and now style that. So inside of this components, I'm going to create a new file, which is going to be a partial file. So underscore, then sidebar.scss. And this is where I'm going to implement all these classes that I just created. So one for the sidebar, then for the modifier of open and closed, and then also for the list item, the logo, and the link. So I have to implement all of this styling. So let's go ahead and start tackling that. So I'm going to make a class of sidebar. And by default, I'm going to have a display of none. So that way we don't see it present here. Also, I have to make sure that I bring this inside of my main.scss. So I'll do that right below the navbar. So I'm going to have sidebar. So component sidebar, I'm going to import. That way I bring in that partial file inside of my main. And now that way, we're not going to see that sidebar present anymore. So that's what we want. And then we do want it to be present when we have a tablet of size of the tablet when it's in portrait mode. In that case, we're going to have display of block. That way it actually displays on the smaller screen. I'm going to have a position of fixed, and then I'm going to have top of 0, left of 0, and then a Z index, because whenever you use this position property, you want a Z index. And then I'm going to set this to something like 200. And then I'm going to want the backdrop also to have a position of fixed, and it's going to be right behind. So it'll just have to be a Z index that's smaller than 200. So for that, I'll do something like 100 when I implement the styling for that. The width is going to be 70% of the screen. And then the height is going to be 100% of the screen. And then it's going to be positioned on the top and left. And then it's going to take up 70% of the width, all the height, and then fixed on the screen. So that's the way that this is going to be implemented. And then another thing I want is to pass a transition property. And this is because when we click on one of the links, we're going to close that sidebar, but I don't want it to instantly disappear. I want there to be a bit of a delay. So I'm going to do transition, transform, 0.3 seconds, ease out. So that way it disappears off the screen in the course of 0.3 seconds. And it's also not going to do it in a linear fashion, but in an ease out. So that way it looks a little bit more natural. And then I'm going to now do the modifiers. So and double dash open. So this is going to do transform translate x0. So this is when it's open, it's going to be positioned on the screen. And then when it's closed, instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to position it minus 100%. So that way it's off the screen. So once we go ahead and click that hamburger button, we're going to apply this open, which is going to move it from this minus 100 onto the screen. When we close it by clicking something like that backdrop, it's going to move it 100%, which is going to go off the screen. So now let's style the backdrop. So I'm going to do and double underscore backdrop. This is going to have a width of 100%. It's going to have a height of 100%. It's going to have a position of fixed. Going to have the top of 0, left of 0, the Z index. Now I don't want this thing to be above my sidebar, so I'm going to do a value less than 200. So I'll set this to 100. Now these values don't really matter. I can even have something like 2 here. I can have something like a 1 here. As long as this value is bigger than this value, this is going to show up on top of this. That's the way that the Z index property works. Then I'm going to set a background color to this, which is going to be background color, which I'm going to set to black. So hash 000. And then I'm also going to set an opacity. That way it's not just plain black, but it's a little bit transparent. So opacity, and I'll set that to something like 0.6. All right, so let's take a look at this now. So back inside of here, if I open up my developer tools, I have this. When I click that, I guess the styling didn't get applied for some reason. So let me go ahead and check out that navbar component and make sure that we actually passed that toggle navbar function to that button. So navbar, and yeah, that's the issue. So we didn't actually pass that onClick, so I'm going to do onClick. Then I'm going to pass that toggle sidebar function that we passed as a prop, so that way when we click this, it actually toggles our sidebar. So now with that, let's click this, and there we are. So now we see this backdrop, and we also see our sidebar present. And then when I click this, it closes. All right, so obviously our sidebar right now is very ugly, so let's fix that. So then back to the code, open up that sidebar.scss, and let's style this. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to style that list. So I'm going to do and double underscore list, and then I'm going to do list style of none, so we don't have those bullet points. I'm going to do a font size of 2 rem to make that text a little larger. I'm going to do width of 100%, and then I'm also going to do the items, so and double underscore item. And then for the items, I'm going to have a margin bottom just to space out each item a little bit, which I'm going to space it with 10 pixels or 1 rem. And then I also want to style the links. So I'm going to do and double underscore link. And then for the link, I'm going to do a display of block text decoration, which is going to be none. Going to have some padding on these links. So I'm going to do padding top bottom of 0.8 rem, and then left and right of 1.5 rem. And then I'm going to have a border radius. And then this border radius, I'm going to set to 0.25 rem. This way, instead of having sharp corners, I have my corners a little bit rounded. And then I'm going to set a background color. And then the background color is just going to be a nice gray color, so #777 for a light gray. And then I'm going to have a color, which is going to be the color of the text of the link, which is going to be a darker gray, so 333, which is the same color that we have for the other links as well. So let's take a look at this right now. All right, so we still have a little bit more to do because we have to style the sidebar itself. So below this transition, I'm going to set a background color, which I'm going to set to a light gray color of DDD. I'm going to have some padding, which is going to be 4 rem at the top and bottom, 2 rem left and right. Let's take a look at that. There we go, looks nicer. Now this has to be fixed up, so let's fix that up. So in particular, I have to fix up the spelling here, and then also want to style that logo. And then this logo is going to have a font size of 3.6 rem. We're going to have a color of dark gray. We're going to have a font weight of bold. And then a font style of italic, just like we had with the navbar. And then margin bottom of 4 rem, just to space out the logo and the list items. All right, so let's take a look at this now. And there we go, looks a lot nicer, except this home we're not seeing. So in particular, this is because we have to edit that active class. If I click on about, check that out. Again, we don't see the about text. So let's go back to that base.scss, check out this active class, and let's adjust this appropriately. So what I want to do is I want to include respond, tap port, and then when we have this screen size, what I'm going to do is set a background color, and then this is going to be #88A for a light gray color. I'm going to set this exclamation mark important to ensure that this gets styled, and then I'm also going to have a color for the text. Oh my, color, there we go. And then this is going to be 333, which is going to be a dark gray, and again, the important property to make sure it gets styled. So let's check that out, and there we go. Now this looks pretty nice. So now when I click, it closes it, and I get navigated here. And then another thing, I still don't have that spacing because we didn't apply that container class, so let's also do that. So inside of my layout.js, I just want to make sure I pass a class name of container to this, because we did create that container class right over here, so I want to make sure that styling gets applied. And there we go, now we have some spacing, but we also maybe want a little bit of spacing on the top here as well. And so to accomplish that, I guess what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pass a style property. So I'll do style, and then I'll do margin top of 50 pixels. So this is the way I'm going to handle that. And then that way we just have a little bit of spacing. Normally what I do is I'd have on the pages themselves this kind of styling. So for example, inside of my SASS, I'd create a folder called pages where I have the styling for the pages. And then that's where I would have things like this margin top. So I would section things out. Let's say I have a header on each page. That header would space things out by like 50 pixels. But because I don't want to actually implement styling for each of these pages, I'm just going to do it in a sort of hacky way like this. But normally I wouldn't use these like style properties when I'm styling things. And then maybe just one final little tweak that I can make is just making this text look a little bit nicer. So another thing that you can do is inside of base, what I like to do is make a typography.scss file. So this is a partial file again. And then here I can do something like h1, and then do font size of 4.2 rem, font weight of 200, just like that. And then open up my main, include this typography file, and then save that. And now all of these look a lot nicer. There we are. So we have a fully functioning navbar now, which is responsive. So if I go smaller, still looks very nice. We see that container, we have less padding on the left and right now. And then when we go larger, there we go. Now we have more spacing. So that looks very nice. And then this here looks very nice, whether we're on a phone or a tablet. And then here we see that these now show up as our screen gets larger. So no matter what the screen size is, this is going to look very nice. And then this whole nav bar, it's completely separate from that sidebar. So that way you can style each of these things completely separately and make them look exactly the way you want. So there we are. We have a fully functioning nav bar now. So just to wrap things up, let's take a look at this in some different devices. So I can take a look at this in the iPhone 6. So it would look something like this. Now this here is squished very close together. So a way that we could fix that, if we actually inspect this and then look at the navbar list, we have a padding on the left and right of 4 rem, which is making this get squished together. So what I can do is just set a padding of 0 when we're on a phone for this list. So let's open up that navbar styling and then find my list, which is right over here. And then I can just apply a style. So I can do include respond phone and then set the padding to be 0 when we have a phone screen size. So that way it's not all squished together when we're on a phone. So now it looks very nice. So beautiful. Now it all functions as it should. I can also take a look at how this would look if I'm in landscape mode. Still looks very nice. And then I can check out an iPad. So there we are. We're in portrait mode. Looks good. Everything functions as it should. And then we can also check it in landscape mode. Now in landscape mode, we see these buttons. So that's very nice. Beautiful. So that works as it should. And then now we have this looking good on any kind of device that you're on. So beautiful. All right, so now you've seen how you can implement a fully responsive navbar on your website, and you can reuse this in any kind of application that you make. And now you know how to style this thing with custom SASS styling, and that way you can make it look however you want. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you haven't yet, please hit that like button. It goes a long way to help a channel like mine grow and get recognized so that others can benefit from the videos I release as well. Also, I have links in the description that you can check out. I have one for an e-commerce course that you can check out if you're interested in learning to develop an application like that. I also have a link for joining my Web Development Kings Facebook group. That way, if you want to personally ask me something, then you can go ahead and do that, and I will happily help you out. It doesn't cost you anything, so if you're scratching your head about something, then just go ahead, ask me a question, and I will help you out. Only questions I probably won't answer are if you want me to help you out with building some kind of personal project. I don't quite have the time to help out with that sort of thing. And then you can also post something in the group itself. That way other developers in the group can help you out with something as well. The group is all about growing your expertise as a developer. So if you're interested in that, then go ahead and click that link in the description and join the family. Also, if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button and turn on those notification bells. That way you don't miss out when I release a new video. And I'll see you in the next one.